Good morning. My name is Estherjoy Mungai. I am speaking on behalf of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. LDF urges this subcommittee to reject House Bill 3728. This bill largely mirrors H.3728 from last session, which hundreds of South Carolinians staunchly advocated against. With over nearly 20 hours of testimony, countless calls, and hundreds of written testimonies, it is irrefutable that the vast majority of outreach this legislature received asked this body to reject proposals like the one before you today. A quality education must necessarily include an accurate and honest accounting of history and current events to provide students with the skills and tools to become critical thinkers and the next generation of leaders. Examining our country's history and acknowledging perspectives that have not always been shared is essential. It is well documented that for decades, South Carolina's textbooks glorified the Ku Klux Klan. But in 1984, the South Carolina General Assembly recognized the need for a broader, more inclusive portrayal of the nation's history that would recognize the experience, culture, and contributions of Black Americans. Current South Carolina social studies, college, and career-ready standards require discussion of various topics related to race. Passing these proposed bills would undercut this progress. While there are many alarming provisions of this legislation, I will focus on 4 key issues. First, proponents of this legislation will claim they're not seeking to censor conversations about race. There is no need to guess how this proposal may harm education and specifically targets race. We can look at Texas and Florida, states that have passed similar laws with near identical language to examine its impact. Last summer, under the standards review process that was prompted by the passage of SB 3, Texas educators suggested that the State Board of Education that slavery should be taught as an involuntary relocation. In Florida, the Department of Education has now prohibited the teaching of AP African American Studies for high school students based on their recent law HB 7. And most recently, a film about Ruby Bridges, the 6-year-old who desegregated schools in Oklahoma, was pulled from a second grade classroom after one parent complained about the whole class watching it rather than just pulling her child from that class. Ruby Bridges is only 68 years old. What she went through at 6 is not only age appropriate for our students to learn, it is relevant to our current time. We can look at right here at South Carolina, where last year the House Education Committee suggested that the existence of interracial marriage is evidence that racial justice has finally been fully realized. Or when every House floor amendment made by Black Caucus members to protect the teaching of Black history was voted down. This bill strikes at the heart of our ability to discuss race and racism in this country. The vague language is another issue in that if the discussion is a fact-based discussion of controversial aspects of history, however, the legislation fails to articulate a standard or definition for either term, and this could lead to inconsistent and arbitrary implementation. This is an assault on public education. It is response to calls from extremist minorities in this state that doesn't address the understaffing of school systems and overburdened educators that will be subject to frivolous investigations and now lawsuits as well if this bill passed. The loss of funding to schools that are already struggling is another issue that many have hit on in an increasingly tragic teacher crisis that exists in this state and is spreading across the country as bills like this continue to pass. I will defer the rest of the time, but I ask once again for this committee to reject that and to listen to the voices of so many that have already testified before me and will testify after me.